everybody. Welcome to our new episode of Dakota Boys Talk Movies. We are excited tonight to do another one of our video review episodes, which just basically means it's a quote-unquote new movie. It's just that it's not new in theaters. It's newer to being on Blu-ray, video on demand, and all those types of things. And so tonight we're doing that review of Hacksaw Ridge. This is a movie that Dakota and I both missed seeing in theaters.
Yes, unfortunately, it wasn't at our local theater for very long.
It came really short, and it came during a time where both of us just kind of missed that window. And so it was one, though, that was always kind of on my radar for probably the past, for sure, a year. It's been on my radar of, like, I heard this is coming out. I was familiar with the story of Desmond Doss. I'd seen a documentary back in the day where they just interviewed Doss, and he just seemed like this incredibly humble guy who didn't even seem like what he did was that big of a deal, which I always thought was interesting. And so I was excited to see what they were going to do with the movie, and then I was even more intrigued when Mel Gibson came on board to direct, which is just like, you just never know what Mel Gibson is going to do. It's really how that sounded because everybody thinks he's kind of crazy. What I mean is you just never know what he's going to do is like visionary wise. He just always has, I don't know, he's an interesting director. He's always able to bring a look to a movie where he brings it from an angle that no one else seems to do.
Yeah, one thing that was unfortunate about the advertising of this movie, they marketed it as from the director of Braveheart, not as a Mel Gibson film.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting. It never became a Mel Gibson film
until it came out and everyone was blown away.
Until everybody was okay with it being a good movie. And then once everybody goes, oh, that movie's pretty good, all of a sudden it was like, Mel Gibson! Mel Gibson did this! But yeah, before that it was like director of Braveheart and pretty much just Braveheart. They never brought up Passion of the Christ, I guess. But
yeah, except Stephen Colbert.
Well,
it was like one of the greatest movies of all time. We have its director here tonight. Which, I mean, if that's your favorite movie, hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
Oh, to Stephen, he wasn't joking. He actually...
Yeah, he's a huge fan of that movie.
Of Passion of the Christ?
Yes.
Well, it is, I mean...
He is Catholic, come on.
Oh, I always forget that Colbert is Catholic, yeah. I mean, he pulled it off in a way that I think was different because he made a movie where I think, as far as how that movie looked and felt, was a lot more realistic to the time. It wasn't so, like, floaty, ethereal as so many Jesus movies can be, but he gave it more of a grit of Bible times. And so I think it did kind of help you pull you into the reality of it, which is what Gibson does. He's very good at just bringing you into the reality, and I think even as an actor, he's always been good at that. Like, he just gets into character when he's in a movie, too. And so I think that's what helps him be a good director, is that he can see from that angle of, let's bring people into the mind of the person we're following and bring them actually into the situation they're in. I mean, if you saw Apocalypto, it's the same way. It's like, let's really put people into the mind of someone in this time period of this ancient Mayan world, and kind of give you, and then to just figure out a way to make running through a jungle exciting, and he just he just brings this light to things, and he did the same way with this. What was interesting about this movie was how it was really two movies.
Yes, it is.
It's really 2 hour-long movies, maybe almost like a mini-series. Like a mini-series that's just 2 hours long.
Even though, to be honest with you, I always thought this movie looked interesting, but the trailer kind of, in a way, made it seem like a period piece you'd see on A&E, back when A&E did movies.
Yeah, kind of back in their Horatio Hornblower days
where
something. Yeah,
it was, you had a love story going on, whereas at the same time, the main character was dealing with some conflict, just kind of like a very overly dramatic movie. And I was like, I'll still give it a chance, but I don't know.
That was one fear I had, especially I think it was the first trailer.
Yeah,
I was like, this seems really like melodramatic,
yeah.
and I was concerned about that.
Where you
a
had
little bit
people,
too.
you had, the actress that plays, who eventually becomes Desmond Doss' wife.
Teresa Palmer.
Yeah, it's kind of just crying in essentially every scene where she wasn't smiling and looking just radiant. And then you had Andrew Garfield's character, Desmond Doss. Obviously, he ends up in a courtroom just talking very compassionately. And I was like, I just wasn't sure how to feel about it.
Yeah.
And then you see it, and it's something else entirely.
Well, my biggest concern was something that I was fascinated to see that was some people's takeaway from the movie still, even after they saw it. Whereas when I was done seeing it, it changed my mind. Was when you watch the trailer, it felt like they deified Desmond Doss.
Yeah.
Like he was just this untouchable pureness or whatever, and was this like floated like an angel through everything. Whereas I feel like once I saw the movie, I realized he was still portrayed as a human being. You still saw him. He had his convictions, but you saw him question his convictions at times and doubt himself. And it wasn't. And I think the trailers also kind of made it feel like he was never angry or things like that.
Yeah.
Where you see him fight like in anger that he still had about things and things like that. So I just found it refreshing because they didn't deify him. They didn't make this like an old Audie Murphy World War II movie where he's like running as like the hero. No, but you still see a human being through the movie.
I think one thing that I didn't expect was Desmond Doss, the character, and certainly the man. He was really tough for somebody who didn't carry a gun. There's kind of a jarring scene where.
Well, we should go back quick here. So what his story is he wanted to. He felt it was wrong to just sit on the sidelines while other guys went to war. He still felt that.
This is during World War II.
Yeah, this is World War II. He still felt like, okay, it is necessary that we need to stop this evil, but personally, he just had a conviction that he wanted to figure out a way to help in the war effort on the front lines, but not take lives. And so he realized how he could do this was to be a combat medic. So he goes, I want to be on the front lines. I want to still be a part of helping there, but I want to do it without ever even touching a gun. Like he had this thing about he didn't even want to touch it. He just wanted no part of that. And so the problem he was at was you had all the soldiers around him considering him a coward because he wouldn't do this, because they're all in this mode where it's like, let's go mow down these, Japanese, and things like that. Except a lot more racist. But, and so they were kind of in this mode. And so they just viewed him as not wanting to just go and mow down the enemy, as being a coward. And then he had to fight the military saying, no, if you're going to go over as one of our army guys, especially in a combat unit, you need to have a gun. And so that was kind of the first half of this movie, is seeing his kind of upbringing, seeing his coming into love with his eventual wife, and then him wanting to be in the military in this capacity. And so, sorry, do you remember where you were? I just wanted to we needed to, I realized we didn't really set the groundwork.
Yeah,
if you aren't familiar
we kind of
with this
just
movie.
jumped right into this. No, there's actually a scene where he gets beaten by his fellow soldiers while he's in boot camp, and rather than running and tattling on him, he's just kind of like, well, I do sleep pretty hard. And
yeah, this kind of this moment where they just yank him out of bed and just start kicking and beating him there's times when they're all punished because of him.
Yeah, essentially the army
so there's that a little bit going on.
The army was trying to drive him out, essentially.
Yeah, like, we can't kick you out, but we're going to make you quit.
Yeah.
It's kind of what was going on.
and they gave him extra duty, and obviously they were working him pretty hard, and he took it. I mean, I don't think most men could.
Yeah.
I mean, he gets smacked around by another recruit, and you could see the anger in his eyes. He wants to do something, but he doesn't. I mean, me, I would probably fly off the handle.
And I thought that that's maybe why Andrew Garfield was nominated for Best Actor, because I was like, there's part, I was watching this knowing he was nominated, so I was like, I was trying to figure out like what caused him, and I think those were some of the scenes that maybe caused people, like where you could constantly see in his eyes that he was fighting, he was having an inner battle. There was this inner turmoil where it's like it's really the man, like the flesh fighting what he was standing on as what he was attempting to follow as morally right, where it's like his flesh was telling him, I just want to pound this guy back, but he was attempting to fight himself, saying, but I just can't. That's not what I know. And that's where I would say he isn't deified, because you're constantly seeing that inner turmoil just in his eyes, which is where Andrew Garfield not only looked like Desmond Doss a lot. If you've ever seen a picture of Desmond Doss, he did resemble him a lot, but also was able to capture that turmoil that I think any person would have. Even someone who is as convicted as he is, you would still fight that turmoil of like, of want versus should. Maybe, I don't know how that's the best way to put it, but yeah. And so that was interesting, because you're right, Dakota. I mean, I think a lot of us would just say like, fine, I'll take a gun. I mean, even his fiance at one point goes, you don't have to shoot it, just carry it so they don't court-martial you, and because if he's court-martialed and found guilty, he would go to prison. And so he had to really figure out, am I willing to stand on this to the point of stand on this conviction to the point of possibly going to prison? That's where you start to think, well, that's definitely the point where I think I would buckle.
Yeah, I think
where it'd be hard for me to stand on my principles, on those principles. But yeah, so you have this whole first part where it's really dealing with him on a personal level, and then all of a sudden you're at Okinawa.
also known as one of the most intense battles of World War II.
Okinawa. This is we're coming to what will eventually be VJ Day. We're coming near the end of the war. It's in the last year of the war. Okinawa is one of the most brutal skirmishes of the entire Pacific theater. It was the Japanese, I think, essentially coming to the realization that they were losing, and they put everything into not going down without a last fight.
Yeah, they really, really fought pretty hard at Okinawa, and one of the main reasons was this is actually Japan.
Yeah, that's true. This is Japanese owned, yeah. This is Japan. Yeah.
Yeah. To put it in perspective, this would be like if a country landed a force at San Francisco, or Oregon,
or even Puerto Rico.
Yeah, this is right on the doorstep. This isn't on the doorstep of Japan. You're standing inside the house. And they were determined to not let the U.S. take any more territory. And it was a brutal fight through and through. I was actually surprised they did this, but towards the end of the movie, you actually do see the Japanese commander commit seppuku when he realizes they're losing. And I was like, whoa, this movie, every time you thought you understood it, it just threw something new at you, and it kind of just blows your mind a little bit. It really sets the tone, and I don't think at any part in this movie I was bored. It kind of just kept.
No, it was always interesting and it was always moving.
Yes.
But that's who Mel Gibson is. Interesting and always moving.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think he wants to bring a movie where it's like, you want to bring... It's what all directors, I think, attempt to do. It's just that I always feel like he's pretty good at hitting it, where it's like, I want to bring a movie that I would want to see, but at the same time still tells the story that needs to be told.
Yeah, and he got a lot of great performances out of people. Hugo Weaving
as Desmond Doss' father in this movie, I thought gave one of the best performances I've ever seen him give.
Yeah.
I was surprised he wasn't nominated.
Yeah.
Because I found him to be very convincing.
Yeah.
And do a tremendous job.
For the first time in probably about 10 years, you saw Vince Vaughn give a pretty compelling performance.
Vince Vaughn was pretty good in this. I think it was distracting because he was Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
But I thought he still did a good job.
Yeah.
I thought he still did a good job, yeah. Sam Worthington, just giving a performance you didn't hate was refreshing. Because I don't really like Sam Worthington hardly in anything I've seen him in. And I thought he did a good job as the captain.
Yeah, he comes off as kind of scummy, and then towards the latter half of the movie, you kind of sympathize with him a little bit.
He's almost not so much scummy. I felt him more as like he was the captain, just trying to keep control of his group.
Yeah,
where it's just like, at first he's just kind of like, you just feel him like, just get out of here. That's what he feels like he's saying to this private Dawes, where it's like, just get out of here, kid, so we can get this done.
Yeah.
And he just felt like Dawes was kind of this hold up to what he wanted the structure of his unit to be. So yeah, but I think as far as I want to get into this a little bit, Dakota, because I think this is important. Now, the obviously the center focus of this movie is Desmond Doss, because he's of what he did. But another argument I heard against this movie was he was a man who refused to kill, and the last half of this movie feels like it totally glorifies killing. Where do you land on that?
Oh man, I wouldn't say it glorified killing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
because I was getting PTSD watching this movie because I felt like it did everything but glorify killing. I think why people feel that way is because he showed it for what it was.
Yeah,
and it's ugly.
Not every war film could be like. I'm thinking of the old movie with John Wayne on Iwo Jima, where someone gets shot, they just fake like they got shot, and
they just kind of wiggle their body and
they do the overly dramatic death scene, like, oh, I've been shot, and you slowly fall to your knees. It's not like that. War is actually pretty horrible, and you should know this, but people don't want to be reminded of that.
Well, and I think it also gives you a sense of, here is Desmond willing to run into this hell with no protection, but a helmet. His helmet was the only thing he really had as protection. He ran into that and was willing to put his life on the line very vulnerably, because he had no way to give himself any cover fire on his own, and in attempt to pull guys out who were hurt and injured, and you also just see him. You get a sense for when they do the times in his childhood and even into his younger years growing up. You get a sense of why he starts to have these convictions of who he was. But I mean, you see him just be stubborn to the point where guys are like, this guy wasn't worth pulling off, and he's probably just going to die. And he just goes, you don't know that.
Yeah.
You just see him completely adhere to, like, every life should be valued the same. That he just feels like everyone out there was worth protecting, and so that's where you do get this sense of Desmond Doss reminds me a lot of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which some of you maybe don't know what that is, but he was a German pastor who had to fight his own convictions on. He was a pacifist. He was a pacifist who was involved in a plot to assassinate Hitler. Okay, so how does that work? Well, it works because it kind of works, is that this man battled his own ethics and moral standings on trying to understand how you stop evil without necessarily killing. And so, yeah, it's a messy thing. War is just messy.
Yeah.
And that's what I think this movie does. This movie doesn't, I don't feel like it glorifies anything about war. Personally, I feel like it just shows you how horrible it was, and that these men went through.
Yeah.
And really that the reason that this story's told is because Desmond Doss' story is one of the glimmers of light that happens in the midst of this terribleness, and that this is why this movie was made, is that he was this conscientious objector, which means he went in gunless but won a Medal of Honor because of what he did, in this battle. And so, this is getting told because in the midst of all of this terribleness, you have this incredible story, of who this guy was. And so I found this movie to be very well made, and I think some people, I had heard some other kind of rumblings of how it was kind of like cheesy.
Okay.
I mean, I think maybe you could feel that in the first half, but I think it's only because of the time period it was. It's like, I don't think it was cheesy. I just feel like he was telling a period piece love story, and I think people were just less sarcastic in the 1940s. I think people now, we're so kind of sarcastic and jaded in a lot of ways.
Well, people in the movie themselves kind of find Desmond Doss a little unbelievable.
Well, and he was. Not only does he already have all these things, but here in the midst of the war, you find out he's also a vegetarian. Yeah. Where one guy goes, "Aren't you going to eat your food?" And he goes, "I'm a vegetarian." And the guy goes, "Of course you are." He just says it like that because it's like, if Desmond isn't ridiculous enough of a person, here he doesn't even eat meat, and so, and that's true too. He was actually a vegetarian. It's just, he's just one of those guys where, yeah, even in his time, he was like, "Who the heck are you?" And so it is kind of interesting, but I guess I never really felt any moment of this movie was cheesy, per se.
No, I think people just, I think people just view things kind of, their view is so just askew, they can't really take things at face value. It's like, "Oh man, that's too cheesy, that's too corny. I'm sure it didn't happen like that." Kind of just one of those.
Yeah. But yeah, so overall, anything else about, I guess, we kind of talked about acting. Visually, this movie was, I thought Mel Gibson, the way he shot the two aspects of this movie, the 1940s 1930s and 1940s Americana, and the way he shot World War II Okinawa, I don't know, I found it very well. I thought all that was executed well too. Even beyond, I thought most of the acting was pretty well. I don't know, anything. What would you say what do you think the biggest flaw of this movie was, Dakota?
Oh, flaws, huh? I don't know. The only flaw I'd really say is in the beginning, the movie kind of draws itself out a little too long.
Okay.
I feel like
you feel like some of his younger life could have been.
Yeah, like they were trying to pad the runtime. There's a scene in this movie where he's Desmond Doss is cleaning like windows in the church. It's like, well, why didn't you just start the movie off like that?
Okay,
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah, they in a way they could have. You're right. Yep.
but that would have meant we would have missed out on some more Hugo Weaving, and I oddly
Well, and
enough thought
I think
he should have been in this movie a little more.
I think some of that childhood they felt was important because there was a few childhood moments that really set up why Desmond became who he was.
Yeah.
I guess my biggest flaw was I feel like maybe the character development of other people besides Desmond was lacking at times, where it's like I felt like there were certain people I wish I could have known better just in who they were, like Desmond was the only one I feel like was really fleshed out in this movie, and everyone else you kind of just knew one or two things about them. But at the same time, you still knew and understood what you needed to know and understand. But there was just a little bit of that I felt like where it's like, I wish I kind of understood them a little better. But maybe that was just, maybe some of that was the makers of this movie, whether it's producers or Gibson himself, was like, well, we need to focus on this, and I think the audience is smart enough to maybe fill in some of those gaps, and maybe that's kind of the thinking they took on some of that aspect. But I guess that would be like my biggest flaw is like I just wish certain people were a little more fleshed out a little bit, which is like almost the opposite of what yours was, where you're like cut it down. But I feel like maybe those two things could still work together in a sense. But that's kind of where I was. So on a grading scale, we'll use the 8F grading scale. Dakota, where would you rank this movie in terms of grade?
Man, I think I'm gonna go with A-.
Okay, A-. Yeah, as far as where I would put it, I think I'm kind of in that same realm where I would give it a A-, just because it isn't perfect, but at the same time I think it still tells the story it meant to tell and did a good job within that. You understood Desmond Doss really well, which is what the movie was doing, and I think Mel Gibson really showed you just that story within the terrible situation he went into, and how he was just used, how he was used in that terrible, terrible place to end up being someone who saved people out of where they could have really just bled to death in that place or whatever. And so it was cool to see that story put to the screen and done pretty well. Done very well in that way. So anything else on Hacksaw Ridge, Dakota?
No, I think we covered about everything.
Yeah, I guess my disclaimer would be it's a very well done biopic. Unfortunately, it's not for everyone, just because it isn't an easy watch.
Especially the last half of this movie.
It isn't an easy watch, but again, it just shows you the reality of what that was and how it is amazing that anyone lived. Honestly, it's amazing. And if it's not amazing enough for how many guys he rescued, there's even one other amazing thing he did that still blows my mind, that I almost find more incredible. Like, here he got all these guys off the ridge, and then he still had another amazing thing he did. But I want to leave it like that because when it gets to that, it's just like, oh my gosh, it's like it's just crazy the things that this man did and how he was so humble into his. I mean, nobody even really. I mean, he got the Medal of Honor from Truman, like clap, 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 yay. But nobody even really knew his story for many years because he just went back to work and just was quiet. He was just a quiet, humble guy. He just didn't really think much of what he did. And Hollywood was desperate back in the day to get a movie made where they really tried to woo him, and he's like, he just didn't want to. And not until they did a documentary where they interviewed him where he finally started to be open, like, okay, but then he did pass away in 2006 during the time of when they were working on getting this made. But his son kind of helped keep the family aspect of the making of this movie going. So, but yeah, definitely worth the watch if you're able to handle the carnage of war. So, yeah, kudos to Mel Gibson for quite a comeback movie. It's been 10 years since he's done a movie, and he didn't really miss a step in that 10 years. So, but yeah, with that, we'll bring this episode to an end. We hope you're following us on the social media places and subscribing to us in all those places on YouTube and iTunes. Just you're aware of the newest developments with us and checking that stuff out. So,
something we don't get anymore?
What's that?
And it kind of bothers me. Why don't we get people asking us to do reviews?
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while. Back a while, there were some people asking us to do some reviews, but it's been a while since we've had any direct suggestions. I guess I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
I guess, but
yeah, if there's something you want to see, I mean, even if it's an older film, which is what we did get asked a lot when we first started doing this,
yeah,
we'll attempt to do what we can.
Yeah, even if it's not a new release, we like going back and revisiting. We've done that a few times, revisiting some older movies, or in like our lists episodes we've done. We'll bring up some older movies, and older can mean whatever you want it to mean: 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s, teens. Movies go back to the teens, people. But yeah, so feel free to do any of that or all of that. We'd love to hear from you. But yeah, with that, we'll end this one. So this is Steven.
And this is Dakota.
We'll see you later.